This is Melissa Bro, and you're listening to the Fency Dog Sports Podcast, brought to you by the Fency Dog Sports Academy, an online school dedicated to providing high-quality instruction for competitive dog sports, using only the most current and progressive training methods. Today, we'll be talking to Ashley Escobar and Kelly Daniels about canine fitness. Hi, ladies. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Excited to chat. So to start us out, can you each share just a little bit about yourselves, your background, and your experience with canine fitness? Ashley, you want to go first?
Yes, I'm Ashley Escobar, and I have extensive experience in canine rehab and fitness and conditioning. I come from the equestrian world with equestrian conditioning for hunter-jumper horses in my young teen, early adult years, and switched over to the canine industry of that. I primarily focus in my own dogs for agility and obedience sports, so lending to the knowledge of fitness to support them in movement and sports life is where I'm at currently in my career. And I share my home with 3 border collies and a couple of Australian shepherds and a couple of kids, and that's me.
Awesome. Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly Daniel. I live in New Zealand, hence the accent that some of you will probably know. So I started out as a high school biology teacher and then got into dog sports. So I started with agility and have moved on to nose work. I've started with canine fitness training just because I really enjoyed it, and there wasn't really a lot of people in New Zealand doing it. And since then, I've kind of broadened and I've added exercise rehabilitation to what I do, and I've recently qualified in hydrotherapy. So I'm looking at putting a pool in at home to do hydrotherapy with clients, which is super exciting. I get involved in absolutely any dog activity that I can. I really love learning about all of them. I train and compete with a really broad range of sports with my dogs. So my primary sports are agility and nose work. I'm a nose work judge as well. But I also train and compete in tracking and gun dog sports and rallyo and obedience and pretty much anything that I can. So my sort of prime interest in the things that I like the most are, my little terrier, making fitness really specific to dogs' needs, whether that be sports or their life. And I really like coming up with new stuff and just being creative with fitness exercises. That's what I really enjoy doing.
Awesome. So I think, interest in canine fitness is definitely on the rise, but, still sometimes kind of gets overlooked by handlers, maybe until they have a dog who gets injured, right? And then they need to go through rehab. So why do you think it is that people still fail to train fitness skills with their dogs? Either of you want to go first?
Sure, I can go. I really feel like people have a hard time compartmentalizing fitness and activity. I think that it's just a very blanket. My dog is fit. My dog runs on 5 acres. My dog goes for a hike with me. My dog does X, Y, and Z of physical movement. And people look at it as a more general blanket to cover them under the activity portion of their dog, right? And so people do it with themselves too. And so they don't know that it is a set of skills that needs to be trained and has massive domino effect benefits for the dog, muscular wise and performance wise, until they know that it has a massive benefit, right? Until there's a big hole where they've sustained an injury or they're having some issues with collection, right? That's the hot topic right now. So many people, their dogs don't know how to collect because all they do is spend all their time in extension, right? But it's the same thing too with people. Like, people don't realize that they need a specific set of conditioning exercises for their own body until they're sprinting an agility course and pull a hamstring, right? They didn't even know that they needed to prepare their body for that sort of activity. So I think that is the biggest reason why people don't take the time from the beginning. And with puppies and when they're starting out with dogs, right? They don't even realize that it's a whole skill set that they could add into their training, because it's, well, the puppy's going for walks and the dog is going out back and the dog is chasing the ball and all these things are happening, which are movement. You get to check that off your movement box, but there is method to the madness for sure.
Kelly?
Yeah, no, totally agree. In New Zealand, a lot of the agility dogs might be in rural environments. They might be farm dogs. So like I hear a lot of, but they run for 3 hours on the farm. And I think there's very little comprehension of that. All of those things are like applicable across to agility. Yes, they have to run in agility, but you're missing a huge bunch of really essential skills, and also like muscle engagement types. I see a lot of here in person border collies that the owners think are really, really fit because they're doing agility, and they're probably doing too much agility. But their dog can't stand still for 10 seconds. And it's not just behavioral, it's physical. They haven't taught their dogs to engage the muscles in the correct way for stability and strength as well as for movement. And it becomes an issue later on, both in performance and, like Ashley said, also in terms of injuries. So yeah, it's definitely a big gap. I will say that I do think on a whole the sports community is getting much better at doing fitness on a whole. There's people doing fitness because they see the benefits, not because they've had injured dogs, and that's definitely increasing in numbers, which I love. The reason I love fitness as well is because you can do it with your dogs before they can do agility. So I think it kind of helps fill a gap in some handlers that feel like they need to be doing things with their young dogs that might have just gone and done lots of agility training before, which we know is, well, I believe isn't the best for young sports dogs to do lots of sports specific training. So yeah, I definitely think that fitness is a really important thing for those dogs and fills that gap, hopefully. So we get dogs being stronger instead of doing just lots of agility young.
For those who are incorporating into their training, what foundational physical skills do you feel are most commonly kind of overlooked?
I will probably say the same thing. Stillness. Stillness and stability and muscle engagement and correct posture. Like I can see dogs that move. Like we know that dogs can move, but sometimes it's more of a taught skill to teach them to be still. And then, like Ashley was saying before, deliberately teaching them the skills of engaging muscles to accelerate and decelerate, which is essential for life, but also the sports skills like collection and jumping.
Ashley?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me that I see, I have a pretty big clientele in person still. And so I get to see people from the beginning to competing with their dogs. And for me, the biggest foundational piece is the proprioception. That's the lack of proprioception for the dogs. Like there's so many dogs that just don't understand how to move and use their body, right? Everything has been taught with this upper level of arousal because that's where we want our dog to be for the sport to, have the fastest time and have the quickest everything and learn everything super fast. But the dogs lack the understanding of where their body is in space. Like they just don't know how to move their body. And certain exercises, if they're trained as the dog is developing along, and one day my puppy is very balanced and has great proprioception and control of her body, and 2 days later it's like, who is this puppy? Like she can't even walk out the step without like stumbling around, right? So if we're not really careful when they're developing, we can teach them how to use their body in a compensatory manner instead of how to really understand how to have that solid stance and how to have the proprioception in their own body with their own build that they have, since every dog is so different.
How much does kind of how a dog moves ultimately influence their ability to be successful, in training and their sport specific work?
It's everything. To be very blunt, right? Like it influences their efficiency, their coordination, their confidence, even because if they don't feel comfortable about how they're approaching a dog walk, for example, like that's a huge thing right now with these running dog walks that everyone wants, right? Like the dog has to be so confident and comfortable in their own skin and how to maneuver their body on that very narrow plank at a high rate of speed that it really matters that they have that, right? For injury prevention, right? So I don't I don't think it's like success in a sense of fitting every dog into this ideal picture. Like every border collie should move this way, every Australian shepherd should move that way, every spaniel is going to move this way, right? But I think it's really important to know, really be able to take an honest look at your dog and evaluate them, right? Is this dog balanced? You know, do they have more rear angulation than front angulation? And really be able to dissect your dog so that you can then support them in wherever they're weak, because no one's perfect, right? So everyone's going to have some strengths and weaknesses, and being able to recognize that and then build on helping the dog structurally in that manner is going to be more successful for the dog than just having I want my dog to move this way.
Kelly, anything you'd add?
Yeah, sorry, excuse the terrier. We had a big truck go past and he had objections to that. Yeah, I think like one of the skills that I've developed a ton as I've progressed through learning about what I do and what I like to do with dogs is looking at how dogs move. And I always incorporate that in my classes. And I see a real difference in the handlers that have started to be more aware of how their particular dog moves. We know that dogs have huge morphological diversity in their form, like all of the breeds. They're so different in how they're put together. But being able to understand those key characteristics of stance and movement and visually identifying that really gives people more information about their dogs and how they're moving, because we know that some dogs are much more natural movers and they move well and in balance with their structure or their behavior or a combination of these things. And some dogs do not. So I think the first step in that is increasing your understanding of gait patterns and movement and those form indicators, because when a handler can see movement that's not balanced and ideal, and they start to develop the skills of not only how they can identify whether that movement pattern is correct or not, but knowing how to make changes to help improve it, it really makes a big difference for those dogs. So yeah, I think like watching dogs move, you can't do too much of watching lots of different types of dogs move around and be like, they're walking, their head is in the correct position, their body is well aligned, they're now trotting. Oh, look, that dog's a little bit out of balance in that trot. Like, just watch all of the dogs move all of the time.
So how do we distinguish? I know you guys were talking about this a little bit earlier with like, you know, dogs who maybe are active in their daily life or they run a lot on, you know, in the woods or on a ranch or whatever. How do you distinguish between those dogs who are just active versus a dog who's actually physically coordinated and aware? What are those differences?
So to me, a dog that's active, right? They're moving, they're expending energy, they're going in forward momentum, getting from point A to point B. They can sometimes appear to be the fastest dogs, right? Especially in sports. You're like, that dog is so fast. Like, look at that dog just tear it up. But a dog that's coordinated and has really good proprioception, right? They use their body movement with intention and with purpose. And every move, every muscle that they move for collection, extension, lead changes, it's very purposefully done, right? The dog just looks very smooth, like they're just flowing in air. So I think you can really see the differences there between a dog that's I'm going to use the word spastic and frantic looking, right? But for most people, even when I bring new people or family members, right, that I'll talk to clients and they're watching dogs run and they'll see the dog running that might take out every bar, but they're like, wow, look at that dog. Like, that dog's so fast. And it looks like a cartoon character, right? The dog is fast, but the dog is just expending energy versus you get a dog that probably has faster time, right? But it just looks so effortless, right? Because every move that they're making is so intentional because that dog is so aware of their body in space.
Kelly?
Yeah, and I think as well, like in my hydrotherapy rehab, one of the providers we learned from was really big on dogs need to move forward in the medium plane, like forwards is their primary type of movement. And that is correct. But the reality is for sports dogs, we're also asking them a ton to move in those other planes of movement. So we ask them to turn to the side and we ask them to twist their bodies. So I think a dog that has really great movement and proprioception and body awareness, not only can they move forwards really smoothly, but they can move in those other planes of movement really well as well. I think that I see it the most personally in dogs is the transitions between positions and between movement patterns, where you see if they have good proprioception, strength, body awareness, and they can put that all together in a really nice way. If a dog's got gaps in muscles or in movement patterns, or they've got a particular weakness, you often see it break down and get like uncoordinated looking in those transitions. So can they decelerate and come to a nice stand? Can they accelerate and move smoothly through gait patterns to get into a gallop? Or does it look like disjointed and sort of, like chunky kind of in the movement? So yeah, I mean, I always talk about like fluency in movement. And I think what I really mean with fluency in movement is that they can move effortlessly through transitions between positions and between movements.
How do dogs benefit, mentally and emotionally when they become more aware of their bodies? How does like that aspect fit in?
It's very close. I think it's very closely related, right? It's very closely connected because one definitely affects the other, right? A dog that's mentally regulated, they can really think about their movement and they have better access to the prefrontal cortex of their brain, right? They can really intentionally have that purposeful movement and motion for their body. They're more likely to move with purpose, with balance, with coordination, instead of that rushing and frantic and like herky-jerky type movements. And over time, when you have a dog that can move with purpose and intention, you do tend to see less injury. I mean, obviously things can still happen, but you just don't see it quite as much with those dogs. And I feel like you see way more sloppy movements, right? And it can be any sport. It's not exclusive to agility, right? Obedience, right? Sloppy sits or the forging with the heeling or the swinging out with their rear, like they lose control of their body, like they're moving their front end and rear end completely. Two separate dogs are happening there. And so there's a huge connection there with mental regulation and physical regulation.
And I've definitely found also, I've got the over-aroused border collie that is the very typical ridiculous dog that foams at the mouth doing agility. But I actually started fitness primarily with my first border collie, who was very, very dog reactive, 100% of dogs. She was a very anxious, stressed dog. And she's actually the main reason I really progressed with my fitness training and wanting to be qualified, because what I found was that the agility ring was a really stressful place for her. There was dogs. She was scared of the dogs. Having any kind of pressure was really tough for her. When I added fitness in and made sure that she felt strong and confident in her movements, it took one thing off her plate, and it really helped overall with her arousal and her stress levels in the ring, because she felt confident in her body. She didn't have to worry about that so much. And I think it was really, for her, the thing that not only helped her in the ring, because I managed to get her up to agility champion despite her being like really like 100% of dogs within 10 meters, she would try and bite them. She was very, very anxious and scared around dogs. But not only that, I think we couldn't have kept training in agility without our fitness training, because it was the only thing I think that she really saw as no pressure, high reinforcement rate, genuinely fun, without the dogs attached, without the pressure of the ring attached, without the new environments attached. So I really don't think I would have got to where I did with her without fitness training.
That's interesting. I don't think I've heard you share about that before. So that was,
No, she was a really tough dog, and I learned a ton with her, and she was a very cool little dog. But I mean, she was meant to be my first proper agility dog, and then like 100% of dogs she was reactive to. It took me, all of my dogs I got after her, it took me sort of 8 to 10 months to integrate them into the house to a point where I felt comfortable and safe with them in the same space. So she was a very challenging dog.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so if that was just kind of talking about, mentally and emotionally how fitness can kind of help, what about the relationship between maybe impulse control and physical movement? Can you guys talk about that a little bit and kind of how fitness fits in?
Impulse control and the physical movement component of the way dogs operate, there's a deep connection there because the mental state directly impacts and affects how the dogs move and use their bodies. And it really allows dogs to have what I call controlled energy, which is a form of stillness, right? Like so many people, like Kelly mentioned, they don't train their dogs to be still because so often we look at stillness as that's it, it's down, things are off, like just turn the dog off and they're still. But I can certainly guarantee you that as my dog is waiting on her place for 30, 45 minutes for her turn, her stillness is, she's not off, right? Like she's got so much controlled energy that she's able to maintain that stillness and still be mentally ready to go whenever it's time, right? And when a dog has a good foundation, a solid foundation of impulse control, they're just more capable mentally to be present with us in the moment and to move with intention rather than simply moving as a reaction, right? And when we get that intentional movement, we get that smooth, fluid, accurate movement that we're looking for with the dog. And when we don't have that, we get the dog going off the chart on the arousal scale and they move frantically, they move spastically, they take down bars, they misread lines, they crash into the owners on their recalls. You name it, right? We've all seen it, right? You've seen the craziness that happens, and people will say, oh, my dog's just so excited to play this sport. But really, the dog is just mentally outside their threshold of being able to comprehend what it is that we want. And then, of course, that leads into a whole nother, frustration and other behavioral things. But I do think that there's a big gap, there's a big link there. And if you're not careful, and you don't make sure that you grow both of them together, you can easily build a very big gap in your dog's understanding for being able to perform even controlled energy and see it as stillness and be able to perform their sport. But definitely, I think that movement and impulse control are heavily connected.
I think it ties in as well to what Ashley was talking about before with proprioception. So when we learn about like rehab and stuff like that, we learn about the types of like groups of movement patterns. And there's a group of movement patterns which is conscious learned behaviors, and often that's what we're working on in fitness. The next group of movement patterns is movements they do sort of unconsciously, like walking and trotting and running. But what I've found with my fitness work is that really tying into those learned behaviors and that group of motor patterns where they learn how to hold a position and they learn how to be still, it kind of flows through to that next group neurologically of movement patterns where they can have more conscious control and thoughtful movement patterns. And those things link together really well. A dog that is able to like consciously hold their body in positions and move through forwards when cued, backwards when cued, they have more proprioception and conscious control over those movement patterns that are traditionally like unconscious or they just do them naturally. So that's the other reason that I really like fitness training, especially for the dogs that perhaps in their sports aren't so careful of their body and thoughtful, because we can control and slowly build conscious proprioception and awareness and control of their body through those learned behaviors, and then start to move those through those more natural movement patterns. So they're having body control through all of their life and their movements, because being aware of their movements and having control of them is how they're going to be great athletes, but also how they're going to hopefully help prevent injury and not just be ridiculous, crazy beasts.
Fair enough. Is it, when we're thinking about kind of fitness movements and exercises, is it important for the dog to, really understand what the movement is versus just, kind of repeating the pattern or following a lure? Or, how does that factor in? Does it matter? And then how do we know if it does matter, when we're actually at that point rather than the dog's just kind of, following a cookie?
I think it matters because repetition without awareness can create habits without building true physical skill, right? Like if the dog understands a movement when a dog starts to really understand a movement, then they become very intentional about that movement. And it becomes second nature, right? Like if we're walking along and I just push you in the pool, you don't have to think about how you're going to swim to the top, right? You just swim and you come up for air, and then you're able to get out of the pool and then push me in for pushing you in, right? But you don't have to think about it. So I think when the dogs truly understand what it is that we're asking them to do and how to use their body, I think that it just becomes second nature for them. And to me, the fitness component of it, right, it's just the beginning. It's just what we're doing in a very controlled environment. It's what we can do in other areas of our dog's training to help them regain that sort of control and power to their body and movement. But then when we add speed to it and we add pressure to it and we bring it to the ring to get it into their performance for their sport of choice, it at that point becomes second nature, right? Because we can take all of these little skills that we need for our dogs, right? For weave pulls and running contacts and obedience, precision healing, and the send out. So the dock diving, right? All these specific movements, we can break them down to the most fundamental level in a very secure, safe little space, and we can teach the dog how to do those movements without the pressure, without the stress, without the arousal. And then we can slowly start to build that all in so that when we introduce it to our dog in the ring at a performance, it's like being pushed into the pool, right? The dog just knows how to swim. So we've got that part. So we have very intentional movement at that point from the dog, which is what we all want. Because if the dog, they all move so differently, right? So it's very hard to put them in a box and say, well, it's a border collie, so it has to weave like this. Well, my dog might not weave that way, right? But this, this is my dog structure. This is how she's going to move. This is where she's most comfortable. And we can teach it to them in the most fundamental level, right? You don't live there forever, but you have to be able to teach it to them in that level so that you get the very intentional movement, which is what we need.
And definitely with an intentional movement as well, the like ideal or correct muscle engagement. And that's why I love the fitness, because we can really set up our exercises, teach the skills, but also like set the whole thing up in a way that really drives correct muscle engagement. Yeah, I mean, like this little dude, he's 4 kgs. He's smaller than our cats. If you put him in weave poles, he tries to single step through. He's shorter than the distance between the poles and his body length, and like that is not biomechanically possible. So they all move in really, really strange and wonderful ways, but because he's strong and he knows how to engage his muscles, it really meant he's had really great longevity. So I was still competing him at agility. He turns 13 soon. And I was still competing him earlier this year, and he got a challenge in his last show. And a challenge is what they use for gaining titles in New Zealand, and you have to win a class or come second in a big class to get a challenge here in New Zealand. So it's quite a challenging. Cool. It's a hard thing to get a challenge, and like he's a little freak. He's a weirdo that I don't know what he is. He's terribly put together. He's cute. Tiny. He's very cute. He's very naughty. But like this, I genuinely think there's absolutely no way he would have performed to the level that he was able to, but also had the longevity if I didn't teach him really early how to engage his tiny, tiny muscles. Yeah.
So thinking about that, what role does like reinforcement placement and timing kind of play in developing that level of like quality movement?
I mean, reinforcement and placement and timing, right? It's incredibly powerful because it can really, and it does shape how our dog moves, especially if we're teaching all of this at the most fundamental level. And if we're wrong and where we tell the dog that they're right, like that can really influence their posture and their balance and how they weight shift. And I think that the timing of when we reinforce in this particular topic, it helps the dog understand what part of their body that they need to activate in order to achieve that particular movement, right? So you always want to try to reinforce quality and intention, right? Not just the completion of the exercise that you're looking at. Because again, I think it all just really comes back to having that good proprioception, and for the dog that's in front of you, that dog is understanding where their body is in space and how to properly move it and use it.
Yeah, I definitely find as well, like being thoughtful as a handler of where the bulk of your reinforcement is placed while you're working dogs can be something, because sometimes I think people, when they're doing fitness training, don't think about, like, you might have treats in your hand, but the fact that the bowl is down there to the side can really influence your dog's head position, therefore their form. So reinforcement placement, I think, is huge in fitness, and I think you can train skills not in the form we would like with the correct muscle engagement by having reinforcement in the wrong place. So sometimes reinforcement can be the very small tweak that can make a really big difference in how a dog performs an exercise, their form, and therefore their muscle engagement.
So how important is progression with what we're talking about, that like building layer by layer in canine fitness? Kind of like if we're thinking about, are we building to an end behavior, right? Or an end state? Are we, thinking about, from foundation skills all the way to like what advanced fitness maybe looks like? Like, how important is thinking about it that way if our primary goal is maybe our sports skills?
Sorry. Dave.
I think progression, it really matters, right? Because we want to look at fitness as layered skill building, right? If we move too quickly, then our dog learns to compensate and use momentum instead of using control and intentional, purposeful movement and building strength and balance, right? But I don't think there's necessarily one end point, right? What's enough for this dog is not going to be what's enough for the next dog, but it really matters. And I think that you really start to see a difference when you can sit down and you can say, these are my goals, right? Here's my short-term goals. Here's my long-term goals. These are the goals that I have control of the outcome, right? I have control of how my dog understands to move their body through the weave poles. I don't have control if my dog is going to double step or single step. I do have control of teaching my dog not to cross over and misstep through the weave poles, right? So looking at that one specific thing, then I can come over and I can work on fitness exercises that start at the most fundamental level of just weight shifting and shoulder work and activating those stabilizer muscles and really just breaking it down little by little. And then again, just slowly building on it to mimic that exercise that they're going to be doing in their sport. So I don't think there's necessarily a goal like in reaching like, okay, we've done all these fitness exercises, this is it. It's more about, it's ever changing, right? Like I'm constantly changing my performance dog's fitness goals and what we're working on based on the information that I gather when we go and do skill training, right? Like all of my dogs are primarily agility right now. My son has an obedience dog, but after we do like a skills training session, then I can go back and reflect and say, okay, I'm really starting to see a trend of some weakness here. So I really need to come back to the fitness foundation level and start building this up and then taking it to the field in that manner. And I think that's how you really can heavily utilize fitness to benefit your dog's sport long term versus just like you see a problem right now. How do I fix that just right now, right? I think it's multi layers and like forever something, right? You're never done, right? There is no end. Like it's just, there's always something.
Like all training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that people don't realize like what I call fitness foundations. Some of those skills I'm still working on with Grid, and he's 5, because you never can spend too long on the foundations, and you always have things like Ashley said that you might need to come back and fix or adjust depending on their life at that current situation. And whilst we always want to continue to progress and challenge the dogs, the reality is that what they do over their lifespan changes dramatically at the time of the year, at that particular year, and at that age group. I'm just finishing up my puppy and senior dog class at the moment, and it works really well because what the puppies are learning are often skills that are really appropriate for senior dogs as well. And it's really interesting to see the parallels in what the puppy dogs are learning and what we're going back and adding strength or fixing up or filling in gaps with the senior dogs. So it's about, the most important thing with progressing fitness, in my opinion, is being able to have some awareness of what your dog needs and picking the appropriate thing for them right there and then. And that's for their life, but also for their sports. And that is progress because it's going to change constantly through their lifespan. But yeah, and you can never do too much foundations.
I feel like that's true of all sports and all aspects of sports and all aspects of training. And yeah, so you're both offering fitness classes in June. I wanted to just have you each maybe talk a little bit about your class that you'll be offering, what you're going to cover in it, maybe who would be the best fit to kind of sign up.
I have my patience in the details class running this in June. And this is a class, it's a structured class that I built this whole formula on one of my naughty little border collies who had some issues with arousal. And so utilizing fitness and the proprioception of the dog, the body awareness of the dog, and really just peeling back all of the layers to go back to the most fundamental level of how to use your body and how to move it. And then tying that into the emotional side of the dog that sees a jump and they just brain falls out, right? So it was a trial experiment that I did with my own dog, and it turned into just a systematic approach to using fitness and movement games, very purposeful, intentional movement games to help our dogs maintain a sense of emotional regularity, right? So that when you have a dog that you can't even get like a 6 obstacle sequence in or even get any kind of work in, what can we do to help that dog and help regulate their mental state? And with that, using fitness, since there is a strong correlation there between fitness and emotional state and arousal state. So someone that is maybe struggling with their dog, even in training, showing up and just losing their mind or being naughty or all the things that, like, you picture you're going to the training field and you're going to train whatever sport it may be, right? And then you get there and your dog is like, ah, and they just, lose their mind, right? They can't hold a start line. They're just barking or nipping at you or orbiting around you or running the fence line, barking at another dog, but they're clearly over threshold, over faced, over aroused, whatever the term is that you want to coin it with. But this is a class about helping dogs regulate their emotions through teaching them how to move their body, like not just a dog body or a border collie body, right? But how to move your dog's body and what is the best system in place for that and patterns, if you will, for fitness with that.
Awesome. Kelly, you want to tell us about your class?
Yep, I've got my Fun Fitness Foundations class restarting, which is trying to help handlers enjoy fitness training. So we want to make it fun. So there's challenges throughout the class just to try and get you guys out doing a little bit more fitness. It's really aimed at people that either want to take a start at fitness training and really focus on those foundations, but also for people that perhaps have gaps in their foundations or particular skills they're really finding challenging that they really want to address and work on. So the curriculum sort of covers all of what I would consider the foundation fitness skills. So some movement skills, some posture, position skills, but also the training aspects. So we talk about how to train stillness. We talk about how to train deliberate movement patterns, some of those reinforcement skills as well. And then focusing all of those training mechanics on teaching skills that your dog understands, those foundation fitness skills, so they understand them and can perform them in good form. So it really would suit a lot of people because most of us have gaps in our foundations. I also have in the next 3-week round a rear end specific fitness course for those people that are, like Ashley was talking about, proprioception. There's dogs that don't know that their back legs are attached to their bodies.
Mhm.
Aimed at some fun exercises to help handlers develop strategies and dogs to really increase their proprioception and awareness of the fact that they have a back end and they can move it by themselves deliberately in a certain position. So yeah, two classes that are really going to help people with foundations or gaps in their foundations they need to address.
Awesome.
Very
All
cool.
right. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about my naughty terrier.
It's all good. And thanks to our listeners and our viewers for tuning in. We'll be back next week, this time with Sarah Rita, to talk about contact healing. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast either on iTunes, the podcast app of your choice, or over on YouTube to make sure you never miss an episode. Today's show is brought to you by the Fenzi Dog Sports Academy. Special thanks to Denise Fenzi for supporting this podcast. Music provided royalty-free by bensound.com. The track featured here is called Button. Editing provided by Chris Lang. Thanks again for tuning in, and happy training.